Source Elements.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're here today to talk about the Queue Manager, which is a feature of Source Connect Standard and Source Connect Pro. My name is Vincent, this is Robert, our co-founder.
Hello.
And once again, thank you for joining us, and let's get started. So the Queue Manager, what is it? Queue Manager is Source Connect's quality management system for your remote sessions. Queue Manager is a separate application included with Source Connect Standard and Pro version 3 and is launched using the Queue button in Source Connect. Queue Manager runs the Auto Restore and Auto Replace feature for Source Connect. It guarantees perfect remote recordings regardless of dropouts caused by internet bandwidth fluctuations during the connection. Auto Restore and Auto Replace are features exclusive to Source Connect, available in no other solution, and were developed to be your insurance policy in the event that your session runs into any bandwidth issues. Auto Restore and Auto Replace. So Auto Restore seamlessly fixes internet dropouts in an audio file recorded from a Source Connect connection. This process happens in the background the moment the recording is stopped. The Auto Replace function can be used to seamlessly switch the compressed audio in a remotely recorded audio file with the pure uncompressed audio directly from the connected party. This means the quality is the exact same as if the recording was done locally.
So how does it work? The Queue Manager scans your DAW's audio files folder, and it looks for recordings that match your Source Connect connections. If a dropout occurs during a remote connection, the Auto Replace function will scan and find the dropouts in the audio file, and it will fix the dropouts automatically. So this means that the engineer doesn't need to wait for the files to be fixed before they proceed with the next take or doing any edits on those existing takes. The Auto Replace function takes the pure audio captured directly at the remote end of the connection, and it switches it in place of the streamed compressed audio recorded in real time during the connection, because Source Connect streams compressed audio in order to get it through the internet. Only Source Connect Pro side of the connection can restore or replace a file, so the engineer needs to be running Source Connect Pro. Auto Restore is possible when the Talon has Source Connect Standard, and if the Talon has Source Connect Pro, then the Auto Replace function is also available. So you need Source Connect Pro on both sides of the connection for Auto Replace.
Sorry, give us just one moment. Sounds like we're having a technical issue. I'm being told there's some echoing going on. Just mute for a second.
All right, here we go. So this diagram shows the just sort of the flow of data and audio. The blue line here shows the real-time connection through Source Connect. It's coming from the talent side of the connection and being recorded directly into the audio files folder of the Pro Tools session on the record side in the lower right side of the screen there. So as the audio files arrive, the Cue Manager just above it scans that audio file, and if it finds a dropout, it then asks the Talent's Cue Manager on the just below the microphone to send it the missing data. The Talent's Cue Manager then sends that missing data over the background FTP. It gets put directly into that audio files, into the audio file, and then that file is healed essentially, so it's dropout free at that point. So there's a few things in just setting up the Cue Manager system. The first thing is that both sides of the connection need to launch their Cue Manager, and they need to make sure that the Cue Manager is online. The next thing is that on the remote side of the remote record side of the connection, the engineer needs to choose, or they can drag and drop their audio files folder to show the Cue Manager where the audio is being recorded to, so it can scan those files. The next thing is the engineer needs to make sure that they are recording the exact output of Source Connect. So this means that you can't change the fader, like lower the gain or run it through a compressor or an EQ. You have to record exactly what comes out of Source Connect. And then finally, before connecting, the engineer needs to make sure that they check the Cue Restore and the Cue Replace checkboxes in the settings section of the Receive settings section in Source Connect Pro. So we're going to show how to use the Cue Manager. In a moment here, Vincent's going to go over and we're going to show you a connection. Just give us one moment here. All right, we're just waiting for Vincent to come over here, and we're going to get a connection on Source Connect going. Just give us one moment. All right, there's the connection. All right, Vincent, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. All right, so back over here to Pro Tools. And so here's a typical Source Connect connection. I can record Vincent. In fact, I think you have a script about a fox or something. Actually, stand by one second. I apologize. Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm going to go over the setup. That's what this point was. The first thing is we want to make sure that the Cue Manager is launched and online. So over here in Source Connect, we can click on the Cue button, and it's going to launch it. Source Connect Pro has an option to automatically launch the Cue Manager. So we can, on the settings panel, we can see right here that the Cue Manager is online. The next thing is over here, we can choose our audio files folder. You either click the choose button and it brings up a dialog box for you to, select it. Or if you want, even easier, you can just go to the Finder, and here's my Finder window, and over to the Pro Tools session, and just grab that audio files folder and drag it into the Cue Manager over here, and it lists where you're recording the audio files to. So now it knows where to look. And then back over to Source Connect, which we did before we connected here, but I made sure that this Cue Restore and this Cue Replace button were clicked before connecting. So now that that's all set, we are set. And you can see below my receive, or just to the left of it, it has a cue that is good. It does not have a slash through it. And so that indicates that everything is set up well. If it had a slash through it, it would indicate that there's a problem. Maybe a Cue Manager is not logged in or something like that, is essentially what that would indicate. So now we have our Source Connect connection up, and I'm going to go ahead and just record a take of Vincent. Vincent, we are rolling.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
All right, so we're going to go back over to the Cue Manager. Now that that file is recorded, if I go back to the Cue Manager, we're going to give it a second. You can go to the Activity panel, and then we are the request side, so we're just looking at the requests. And we're going to close that old session. And we're waiting for this file to show up. It's going to take it just a moment. And it's going to show up in blue. There it is. So that blue indicates that it's the current connection that we're running right now in Source Connect. And if we open up the little tab here, it's going to show, hey, here's the file that I just saw you record. And by the way, nothing dropped out. Restore not required. So nothing needs to be done there. In fact, you can click
Robert,
on...
Can you go ahead and minimize your settings in Source Connect?
Yes, I can. Boom. There we go. So, in fact, over here in the Cue Manager, if you click on the file, you can see how many packets were restored or replaced or needed to be restored and replaced. As I said, in this case, none. There was nothing that was dropped out. So we have a little trick here. We're going to try to mess up Vincent's internet connection. And here we go. So, Vincent, let me know when that's set. Yeah, that sounds pretty bad. Here we go. We're rolling on take 1 or take 2. Go ahead.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
All right, and so that sounded horrible, clearly. I'm going to bring it down here to the playback track. And I can actually edit that up. I can roughly, I'm not going to spend much time here, but I can bring that file over here and maybe put this over here. And whatever we could do, I don't know what this word is over here. Bring that one over. Very, very rough edits, for sure. I didn't even really listen to them. I'm sure you would listen to your edits when you make them. But if we go back over to the Cue Manager now, we should see that, in fact, it found that audio file. It is requesting it. It has already fixed it. It says restored. So as quickly as I could get over there, it got over to that audio file. It automatically restored the file with all those dropouts. Now what happens in Pro Tools is that Pro Tools is still looking at the disk, the RAM cache that it builds. It's not looking at the audio files directly on the hard drive. But here's a trick that you can use to kind of prompt Pro Tools to look at the audio files directly. I'm just going to click on the setups menu, go to Playback Engine. I'm just going to nudge my disk cache and say OK. And give it a second here. And hopefully about now, if I play this file back now.
The quick brown.
Oh, let me mute this other one.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
And there you go. So there was no dropouts in that already. You can see that visually there's still a bunch of dropouts. So actually what you can do is you can go to the bin over here, and if you right click on that audio file, you can say recalculate waveform. Oops, hold on, not that one. And now you can see as I recalculated the waveform, it's all healed. So that is the restore process. The next thing is replace, and that's pretty easy. We would, at this point, have probably, typically you would finish with your whole session, you've done all your takes and your edits, and now you've disconnected. So there's the disconnect. And when we go back to the Cue Manager, now that we're disconnected, that session shows that it's now black, meaning it's not an active session. And I can take this file here, I can highlight it, and in the Options menu, all I have to do is go over to Options and say Replace Now. And so once again, it's now going over to Vincent's system. It's waiting. It's up. His system is uploading it. Give it a moment. We're going to see that our system will download it. Once he's done there. Now we're downloading it. And in a second, it's going to say replaced. And it's done. It's replaced. So once again, to realize that, we could either close and reopen the Pro Tools session, or I can go here and I can just bump our disk cache again. Go back up, we'll say, and give it a moment. And now if I play back this audio file.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
With my really awesome edits, by the way. But that is now completely lossless, uncompressed audio from Vincent's system, as if he was recording directly into my Pro Tools system, like straight through an XLR cable. So we'll go back to our slideshow. And so it's just some additional features and things that the Queue Manager has additionally. Number one, the Source Connect Pro Queue Manager has the ability to export an entire PCM, which is the compressed file, or the PCM file, which is the WAV file, or a compressed MPEG file of the entire connection. And so this might come in useful if, for some reason, I don't know, your hard drive crashed and lost everything, all your recordings on the remote side of the connection. You could export every moment, just like a full backup of the entire session. Or maybe the talent told a really great joke and you didn't record it and you wanted to find that joke. You could basically get that file back. So to do that, that's from the audio options menu, or from the options menu, and for that you would go to the activity and you'd be the upload, because that's the talent side, is the upload side. And then from the options menu, you'd highlight the file, and then you'd select either export PCM or export the MPEG file. The other option that's in there, again on the talent side for the upload, is they have the ability to export an entire restore or replace package. And then it contains all the data that's necessary to perform the restorations or replacements. And so that can be transferred over to the engineer using really any system, Dropbox or WeTransfer. Excuse me. And then once the engineer has it, they can just drag it into their Queue Manager request section, and it'll find the session that matches that, and then they can perform all the restorations and the replacements without having the talent system staying online. So perhaps maybe the talent doesn't have time to leave their system online. They have a plane to catch, who knows. And so this is a way for the talent to deliver that data without waiting for the engineer side to have to process everything on their own. Or some other best practices here. Again, you want to record exactly what comes out of Source Connect. So your aux file or your aux fader in Pro Tools that has your Source Connect plugin, if you're using Nexus or the Link plugin, you want to make sure that that is at 0 decibels. And if you are sending that to a stereo bus, you really need to pan it hard left or hard right, because if you leave that panned to the center of the stereo bus, you're really going through a gain reduction. And so now the Queue Manager won't be able to track that file if you go through the center of a stereo bus. Really, it's best just to send it to a singular mono bus to capture it on a mono audio file, or if you're recording in stereo, of course, you'd use a stereo bus going to a stereo audio track. You don't want to use a network drive to record your audio files too, because the Queue Manager just won't be able to action them. It's not on the same local system. It just causes problems. As I showed you, the Queue Manager, especially with Pro Tools, it needs to have its disk cache sort of jogged so it doesn't look at the RAM cache for the audio, but it goes back to the disk where we've fixed the audio, and it kind of reloads that very quickly into the Pro Tools session. The remote side of the connection, the talent side, is collecting all this data. So at some point, the talent might need to clear that data out. They would, of course, want to wait until the engineer has done all the restorations or the replacements, and then there's a button within the Queue Manager for the talent to basically delete all the queue data once they're done. And finally, there's a rescan option from the audio options menu in the request side of the Queue Manager. So if for whatever reason, maybe the Queue Manager wasn't launched, or the engineer didn't show it the audio files folder, the engineer can then manually scan in any audio file, and it'll figure out what connection that was part of, and then you can, again, do the restorations or the replacements from there. So that is the entire Queue Manager in a nutshell. I think we're going to open this up for some Q&A if we have questions.
Yeah, so we do have some questions here. Let me just quickly scroll through what's been happening. Yeah, so just really quick, everyone, any of the echoing issues or any of the audio dropout issues that we were having, most of those were just related to internal routing things. We have a number of mics and different rooms going on.
Sorry about that.
Other than that, Steve had asked where you would click on standard for the Queue Manager. So there is a Queue Manager button on standard as well.
It's at the bottom of standard.
It's at the bottom of standard. Now, the other question you had, Steve, was, or was it? I thought I just saw it. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, the additional features for Source Connect Pro that with Queue Manager is that Source Connect Pro can receive Queue Manager data, both auto restore and auto replace, whereas Source Connect Standard can only send that Queue Manager data.
So you want to have Source Connect Pro on the remote recording side of the connection, but you really just need Source Connect Standard on the talent side of the connection, and they can deliver that restore data to the engineer that way. The talent side is a very easy setup. Really, all they have to do is launch Source Connect, connect, launch their launch Source Connect, launch their Queue Manager, make sure their Queue Manager is online, and then connect. That's really all the talent has to do.
Alan had asked, if you don't use the RAM cache using a high-speed SSD or NVMe drives, will Pro Tools automatically update the audio referenced?
No. If you want Pro Tools to automatically update the audio reference, you have to go back to Pro Tools 9. That seems to be the behavior of Pro Tools. So even if you put that disk cache at normal, it still seems to reference RAM in some way. That's our finding.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. What else do we have? Do we have any more questions, anyone? We'd be happy to answer anything else. Well, while we were waiting on some more questions, Robert, why don't we go back to a screen cap and show some of the other features that we were doing before? So just
Sure.
go ahead and close
So
up.
all right. So here's the Queue Manager, and so the first other options we'll look at the request side. So this is the the upload side. This would be the talent side if it's Source Connect if they're running Source Connect Pro. In the audio options menu, first of all, you can select the session, and then in the audio options menu, here's your option to export the PCM file, or export the MPEG-4 file, or export a restore package or a replace package. So for instance, if you export the, we'll just do a restore package, and we'll send that out one folder, and there it is, and it's done, or it's almost done. There we go, now it's done. So now that basically looks like this over here. It's this little source elements logoed file. And you can send this over to the engineer. Now, if I import this, it's going to tell me it doesn't know what it is because this is not the side that recorded it. In that case, that was the talent side. But what the engineer would do once they received this file is they would just drag it over to the queue request side. And if I do this here, it's probably going to tell me it can't find a matching session. Let's do that. Yeah, so that error there just means it can't find the matching session because this isn't the Queue Manager to be loading that into. But if this was the record side of that connection, it would have figured out which session it was, and it would have put a little icon right here that says this is the data is now local, and you can go in there and action any restorations or replacements that you want to do. So some other.
So we have some. Yeah. So we do have some questions.
Sure.
So Mike asked, so all edits are replaced?
Yes, as I did before with my horrible editing over here, which I'm going to delete that little thing I did. I edited that file before I restored it, and then once I restored it, all the edits followed automatically. I did not have to wait to have the restoration happen before I edited it. And then when I was done and I replaced it, again, the replaced audio followed the edit. So you can treat the audio that you record as the final audio, and you could replace it and restore it literally as long as that data was still in the talent system, or you had that replace or restore file that's exported. You could replace it 10 years later or a day later. It doesn't matter. Or obviously the best time is to do is a few minutes after your session or as quickly as possible.
Okay. So Mike also asked, what are the login details for the Queue Manager?
Back over to the Queue Manager here. First of all, the Queue Manager in the advanced section, you can have it start automatically with Source Connect, and that is, I recommend doing that. Unfortunately, Source Connect Standard does not have that option. If you're on Source Connect Standard, you need to manually click that Queue button at the bottom of Standard and launch the Queue Manager. So the next thing is Queue Manager has an auto option, meaning wherever you log in on Source Connect, the Queue Manager will follow. But you can select manually and tell it what account you want to log into. There really isn't too much of a reason to do that. Finally, there's a VPN option. If you're using the VPN option to make a VPN connection in Source Connect, you would need to put this onto VPN mode so it follows the VPN settings on Source Connect. There's one other thing to note here. If you're doing a multi-connect session, so you have many Source Connects logged in and they're all logged in with different usernames, you only need one Queue Manager to be logged in, and it'll still track and replace and restore all the audio files from those other connections. So the Queue Manager needs to be able to be logged in, but it does not need to be logged into the same account necessarily as all your multi-connects. It just needs to be logged into one of those multi-connect accounts. If you're, for instance, some people are recording dialogue in an ensemble with multiple actors for a cartoon series or things like that, and that comes into play in a big way there.
Cool. So we have another question here. Alan asked, how do you control where the recording end caches the original audio?
So in Source Connect Pro and also in the Queue Manager, if you go back to the settings folder, and you over here you go into the advanced options, this is where it caches the audio right here. You can click on this button and change the location. It normally just goes to your library folder in the applications support file. That's probably where you want to leave it. That's the default location. But if you want to cache to a separate external hard drive, you can certainly do that and then tell it where you want it to collect all the backup audio that the Queue Manager caches. So that's in the advanced section from the settings panel of the Queue Manager.
Okay, so JJ asks, as a talent and an Adobe user, does Pro Tools need to be a part of my session for the remote user to be able to utilize the Queue Manager?
Not at all. So the reality is that as a talent, you can use Adobe to record a backup of your session, but the Queue Manager is collecting that data also on its own. And so if you didn't run Adobe Audition at all, you would still be perfectly fine. The Queue Manager doesn't care what DAW you're running on the talent side, and really it doesn't care what DAW you're running on the engineer side. I mean, theoretically, you could record straight to a DAT tape, load that DAT tape digitally back into a file, and the Queue Manager would still be able to figure out where that audio came from. So it really doesn't matter what software you're using. What matters is that you capture exactly what comes out of Source Connect. That's how it tracks it.
Yeah, so to be very specific, as a talent, you don't even really need to have a DAW open. Doesn't matter if you're running a DAW, if you're not running a DAW, what DAW you're running. Your connected engineer will be able to get your Queue Manager data as long as you're logged in.
And actually the point here is that as a talent, you might want to run a backup because maybe the engineer is not using the Queue system. Or maybe the engineer is just using Source Connect Standard and they don't have Queue available to them. Because if you're recording Source Connect Standard on the talent side and capturing it with Source Connect Standard on the engineer side, then you do have a what you hear is what you get connection. So as a talent, we would never say don't run a backup, but the reality is that you probably won't need it if the engineer is running the Queue system. It happens completely between your Source Connect and the engineer's capture, and you could very well not run any DAW or any backup if you needed to.
And that's why we're here. We're trying to spread awareness about the Queue Manager.
Exactly.
So we had some other questions. Okay, Ben asked, what if the talent side is a studio that needs to start a new session and cannot stay connected to me?
So as long as the Queue Manager is running, this is the reason why the Queue Manager is a separate application from Source Connect. As long as the you can jump into another session, not even run a Source Connect connection on that session. As long as the talent's Queue Manager is launched and logged in, the other side will be able to get to that and run that audio. The other point is, if it's standard, that's really the only way to do it. If the other side is running Pro, they could export a file and just send it to the engineer right away, or even put it in a FedEx envelope if they wanted to. But yes, you can just leave the Queue Manager running. It will stay logged in even if Source Connect is not up and running.
Cool. What else do we have? We were asked, do the talent and the engineer need to use the same DAW? No, as we were saying before, the talent doesn't even really need a DAW. And the engineer doesn't have to use Pro Tools for this to work. The engineer can use any DAW, because all it's looking for is an audio files folder. Where is that audio that's being recorded going?
And as long as it's recording exactly what comes out of Source Connect, the Queue Manager will pick up on it.
Yep. Alan asked, if you're running against picture/timecode, when Queue updates the recording audio, does it just replace the audio or the metadata as well?
Just the audio.
So no metadata is affected.
Correct. For instance, in Pro Tools, it puts a unique identifier on it. It might have a timestamp of where the recording started. All of that is left alone. It's just touching the audio portion of that audio file.
So Steve said replace does not work if one side is standard, and that's correct.
That's correct.
Replace is only a feature of Source Connect Pro to Source Connect Pro connections.
Correct. So yeah, you need Source Connect Pro on both sides of the connection if you're going to use replace. For most, commercial, industrial, even a lot of ADR sessions, for music, probably replace starts to come into play more. For maybe some of the really high-end ADR sessions, replace comes in more. But we have to stress that the audio quality that comes straight through Source Connect Standard to Pro, or even Standard to Standard, is extremely high quality audio. I'm sure that really the only person that hears the difference is Charlie back here, who's Vincent's dog. He can hear the difference. It's extremely high quality audio that goes through Standard. So in most cases, the biggest feature here often is the restore, because that guarantees that session is going to go smoothly, that no one's trying to figure out where the audio is, where's my backup, where in the backup is the audio that I need because I didn't get it in real time. So hopefully that answers that question.
Do we have any more questions today? Doesn't look like it so far. Do we want to show anything else, Robert?
I'm not sure there is much else to show. Let me kind of click through here. There's a number of little features in here you can do. For instance, if you want to name a session, this is you receiving requests. You can rename that session. For instance, this was say Vincent or something or whatever, session 1, and now it changes the name of that session so that if you need to keep track of them in a different way, if not, it just kind of timestamps the session with the date and the time. What else is in there? There is a feature on the you can, let's see here if I can do one. Not on that one. And this one maybe. So this replace. Okay, I don't think I had it checked, but you can undo a replacement. I don't know why anybody wants to do that, but we put that in there for some reason. You can remove a session from view if you don't want to see it anymore. If you do a lot of sessions, eventually you're just going to see a lot of clutter in this folder, and if you know you're done with everything, you can just kind of remove from view. Oh wait, there it is, undo replace. We're not sure why we did that. And what else is in here? You can cancel a replacement if you need to. If you maybe are using too much data, you have 50 million audio files in here, and you realize that one of them is being replaced that you won't ever need. You can just say cancel that one.
I have a question here.
Sure.
In what circumstances would you need to manually scan files?
Yes. So, if for some reason I did not have my session file selected properly, in that case, the Queue Manager won't know where to look for it. And there is actually another setting in here that comes into play here. So in the advanced settings, let me see if we took that out eventually. So it's not even in there. The Cue Manager will only look for new audio files in that audio files folder that you show it. So if the moment where you drag the folder in, anything that exists in that folder already, it's not going to go rummaging through that. It's only going to look at new files that show up. So if you show it this audio files folder after the fact, after the recording has happened, you're going to need to scan those files in manually, which is again over here on the activity panel, request side, show an option, scan a file. And then it lets you go over to a dialog box and you can say, let's scan even this one. Don't know what that is. So if I scan that file, it shows up here in the manually scan section. If there is no Cue data, right there, it says Cue not present. That means that file did not come from Source Connect. If it came from Source Connect, it would drop out of the manually scanned section and it would show up as part of a session that it recognizes. And then down in that session, it would then identify it with, where it, like how many packets and things like that. For example, right here in the data, it says that's how many packets it restored, 693. And it replaced all of them. So in that test that we did when we created dropouts, it dropped out half the time. When we replaced it, it replaced 1,500 packets. So that is a situation where you'd want to scan files in manually.
So we have another couple of questions here. So someone asked, how does the Cue Manager log in from standard? So before we go into this, I just want to explain that we can't physically show you standard's Cue Manager because once you have one version of Source Connect on your computer, it brings that Cue Manager along with it.
Right.
So right now we're using Source Connect Pro because this is our studio computer.
But in the it's funny, we had a screenshot that we were going to load in. We didn't quite get it loaded in time. In the question is where do you launch the Cue Manager from in standard? And it's in the bottom of the standard Cue Manager, of the standard Source Connect.
How does it log in? So it logs in the same way.
Same way. You have manual and auto login, so it's the same as over here. Yeah, it just shows online. Like this top section looks exactly the same.
The only thing it doesn't have is the VPN.
It does not have the VPN, and also it's a single panel. So the standard Cue Manager just shows that you're online, and then it shows your activity, because your activity in the standard Cue Manager is only your uploads. That's all there is.
Correct.
So it's a single window. The standard Cue Manager doesn't have these two tabs up here. It just has one window. It's a simplified version of it.
Mike asked, are there any restrictions on the file upload and download vis-a-vis corporate networks?
It does use, so this gets a little bit more tweaky, and here's where maybe you get into some of the manual settings. If you're using the auto, you can edit this, and you can say, don't use our settings that we're giving you, but instead, if you have your own FTP server, you can put all those credentials in there. So maybe a corporate network, they require that intermediary transfer not happen on our provided FTP account that we give you, and instead it happens on their FTP account. You can choose to do that there. That might be an example of a reason to go and manually edit your login settings for the Cue Manager.
Okay, so we had another question. Is the data coming down the same pipe as the audio in Source Connect? Yes.
Ooh, yes and no.
Well, yes and no. But this also gets to somebody else's question as well. So I think we can explain that question with Alan's question here. Some of my talent use modeling mics that come in as a raw signal and it is modeled by a plugin / live DSP. Would this trip up Cue Manager? So not exactly. It depends on at what point they are feeding you audio. So Cue Manager is taking that information on the talent's end directly from the input of Source Connect.
Correct.
So if you go ahead and show my console
the
window.
UA. If you put the modeling mic on the UA console and then you're set to record, it will get the model.
Yeah. So as long as it's going from that point, it'll be fine. Go back to Pro Tools. And how do you control which input the talent end is? Talent and Cue Manager is snooping. And once again, yeah, it's completely based on the input that their Source Connect is set to.
Right. So that in the standard Source Connect, the input in the upper right corner. Again, I'll show you just sort of on this Pro, but roughly right here in the upper right corner is a menu that says Audio Options. The top option usually says High Quality, and then when you drop that menu, at the bottom of that menu will be your input and your output options.
And we can show the settings in Source Connect Pro just so that kind of makes sense as well.
Like your typical menu where it shows all the audio inputs and outputs of your computer. A Talent might not have this many.
Yeah, Talent probably wouldn't have that many,
They
but
probably have the built-in mic, their Pro mic,
yeah,
maybe
whatever their interface is.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but one really interesting question somebody asked is it using the same data? And so imagine you have two separate internet connections. And this gets to like one of the really nice sort of enterprise features of Source Connect Pro. In Source Connect Pro, under the advanced menu, you can tell it what IP address you want it to use. So if I had two internet connections, maybe on two separate Ethernet connections, I could select which one Source Connect is going to use to send and receive it's the streaming audio. Maybe that's a very dedicated connection. The Queue Manager is always going to use the default connection from the Macintosh, which is the top option in the Networks panel. So if you go to System Preferences, Network, and then over there, the top option. So in that way, you could have your queue data flowing down a completely different pipe than your stream data. If the Talent is also running Source Connect Pro, you can completely separate that. If the Talent's running Source Connect Standard, the Talent will be delivering the queue data from the same internet point as their stream. We usually recommend that you wait to do any replacement until after the session is done. That way you don't really run into a situation where you're causing bandwidth usage that might impede your real-time session. That being said, when the Queue Manager restores a file, it's just sending the missing chunks, and so it shouldn't cause a lot of extra bandwidth to be eaten up in that process. And so you generally shouldn't have a problem using the same internet connection for your restoration as your audio stream.
We got a question here. Is the Queue Manager Mac only?
It is Mac only. It was in very early versions of Windows, and unfortunately it had to be pulled out. So I'm not sure there's a way to resurrect it well enough to work on Windows. It really is Mac to Mac. 3.6 on up are the versions that you need. At least version 3.6. Realistically, the smoothest experience will be running 3.8 and 3.9 to 3.8 or 3.9. You can mismatch versions between those two. Talent on 3.8, Record on 3.9, or vice versa. But it is pretty much at this point a Mac only feature, and we are bringing that back into Windows as quickly as we can, but currently not there.
Do we have any other questions? Is there anything I missed? Please let me know.
Meaning of life?
Is there a Mac OS recommendation /limit? So, I mean, that kind of depends on
really.
if you already have Source Connect or not.
Yeah, it's going to work all the way back to, you might be able to get it to work all the way back to Tiger. Certainly, realistically, anybody running something old but still relatively useful, like Lion and even maybe Snow Leopard, but Lion, Snow Leopard, and anything on up from there, it's all going to work. Anything that runs Source Connect 3.9, which really is Lion on up, is going to have really no problem with the Queue Manager at all.
Yeah. So
that's a pretty old operating system.
Yeah. And so at this point, there's really no reason. If you're on a Mac, there's no reason to be on anything older than 3.9.
Really, there isn't. Yeah. Like the only... It's like skip 3.8, go straight to 3.9. The only people that would want to run a really old version of Source Connect, if you're running Snow Leopard, then you're forced to run 3.7, essentially. But there's little reason to run 3.8 unless you just haven't updated.
Yep. All right. Well, looks like we're all out of questions, and I don't think we have anything else to show.
That's pretty much it. Ultimately, pretty simple. Set it up. Make sure your Queue Managers are logged in. Show it your audio files folder. record exactly what comes out of Source Connect, and then let it do its job, and then either bump your disk cache in Pro Tools or close and reopen the session, and you shouldn't ever have a dropout.
Now we do have one last question here. Can we connect Source Connect 3.9 online to Source Connect 3.9 on Catalina? Yeah.
Yes, no problem.
Any version of Source Connect will connect to any version of Source Connect.
Right. We should stress that there is no Queue Manager in Source Connect now. That is a very simplified free thing.
And currently, Source Connect now does not connect to.
It does not connect to Source
Standard
Connect, yeah.
or Pro.
It only connects to Chrome, basically.
Alan asks what the board is. I assume he's referring to this console here. This is an AMEC Big 44.
Yes.
From like the mid to late 90s.
It's sweet.
It's a nice board. Yeah, we like it a lot. Yes, AMEC. It's got Rupert Neve's voice in it.
Yes, if you run the recall system on it, Rupert tells you it's literally a ghost.
Unfortunately. R.I.P. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We had a great time here today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And have a great day.
Source Elements.